Today seemed like a beautiful day. As usual, I was sitting in my favorite bookstore cafe after work, sipping a cup of coffee while reading the novel I'd been working my way through. What a lucky day, I remember thinking to myself. Hey, mister, could you give me this seat? I looked up to see a teenage girl with a backpack slung over one shoulder asking if I would let her have my table. I answered politely, I'm sorry, but there are plenty of other seats available. Besides, this is my favorite spot, and I'd rather stay here. She frowned and shot back. So what? I want this seat too. Aren't you a little too old to refuse a lady? That instantly got on my nerves. I was only 30, still in my prime, and I took good care of myself. I couldn't understand why this girl was being so rude and calling me old. We argued back and forth for a while before eventually giving up and going our separate ways after what turned into one very unpleasant coffee break. 3 days later, I hurried to the restaurant where my mother had arranged for us to meet. She'd been worried that I was still single, so she had set me up with the daughter of one of her close friends. I wasn't interested in being matched with anyone, but I went anyway because I didn't want to listen to my mother complain. The moment I sat down, I froze. The girl sitting across from me was the very same teenager I had argued with at the bookstore cafe just a few days earlier. She looked just as stunned to see me, clearly never expecting that the man her family wanted to introduce her to would be me. By some cruel twist of fate, the thread that would tie our lives together had begun the very first day we met, over a single seat in a coffee shop. My name is Montrell, and I'm 30 years old. I've built a comfortable life for myself in Houston, with a stable career and more than enough financial security, yet I'm still single. No woman has ever truly felt right to me. Even after establishing my career, I've never been able to open my heart again. Back in college, I fell deeply for a girl, and we spent years side by side. Despite that, she never admitted to anyone that we were together. I kept believing she was only waiting for the perfect moment. Then graduation day came. I thought she would finally introduce me as the man she loved, but instead, she proudly appeared with an older, sharply dressed gentleman and revealed that he was her boyfriend. Standing there with my diploma in one hand and a bouquet in the other, surrounded by my parents on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life, I couldn't even force myself to smile. That painful memory stayed with me, and I made a silent promise that I would become successful and wealthy before ever thinking about love again. More than 5 years have passed since I earned my management position, but I still haven't found anyone. Maybe the scar from that day never truly faded, and maybe that's why I've found it so difficult to let another woman into my life. I pulled my Lexus SUV into the parking lot of my favorite bookstore cafe instead of heading straight home. Tucked away in a quiet corner of Houston, the place was surrounded by lush greenery and lined wall to wall with books, making it the perfect escape whenever I wanted a little peace. I ordered a cappuccino, grabbed the novel I'd left unfinished on my last visit, and settled into my usual seat. I was completely absorbed in the pages until I heard a chair scrape across the floor. Looking up, I found a petite young woman sitting across from me. Mind giving me this seat, mister? This is where I always sit, I frowned. I've been here for a while. You can choose another table. She folded her arms without the slightest hint of embarrassment. Nope, this one's mine. The nerve of this girl was unbelievable. I sighed and tried to reason with her. Don't your parents expect you home? It's getting late, she shot back. That's none of your business. I already asked nicely, and you refused. You're the selfish one. Then she ignored me completely, ordered a drink and dessert, and happily ate while crumbs collected around her mouth. She sipped through her straw with absolutely no concern for appearances, making me wonder how someone who looked like a high school senior could act so carefree. Her school ID identified her as Raven, a name that sounded much gentler than the attitude she was showing me. Realizing there was no point arguing with a teenager, I finally stood to leave. She looked downright pleased to see me go, even laughing under her breath before calling after me. See you around, you stingy old man! I clenched my jaw and walked away, deciding it was better to head home early than waste another minute fighting over a cafe table with such an impossible girl. I drove home, still irritated by the encounter, only to find my mother, Zuri, waiting for me with that familiar look that meant she had something planned. Montrell, one of my closest friends, wants to introduce you to her daughter. She's beautiful, smart, and such a sweet girl. I couldn't help letting out a tired laugh. Mom, how many women have you tried to set me up with already? She waved off the question. This one is different. Her name is Raven, and she's as polite as they come. Raven? I had just met a girl with that name at the bookstore cafe, and polite was the last word I would have used to describe her. Fine, I muttered. Do whatever you want. Mom narrowed her eyes. You make it sound like I'm forcing you. Aren't you? I teased. She immediately fired back. You're 30 years old. People your age are raising kids by now. I raised both hands in surrender and headed upstairs to my room before the lecture could get any longer. What a day. It wasn't that I didn't want to get married. At my age, I often imagined coming home to someone who would be waiting for me. But after so many disappointing blind dates, I'd grown tired of wondering whether women were interested in me or simply the comfortable life I could provide. Still, showing up meant there was at least a chance of finding the right person. Refusing to go guaranteed nothing except another round of Mom reminding me that I wasn't getting any younger. After clocking out that day, I headed to the restaurant Mom had chosen, still dressed in my white button-down shirt with one hand resting on the steering wheel. My parents had gone ahead because they were worried I might show up late. Judging by how much effort Mom had put into arranging this dinner, the family we were meeting had to be very important to her. A hostess led me into a private dining room that had already been reserved. The moment I stepped inside, I froze in surprise. Sitting across the table was the same bold girl from the bookstore cafe a few days earlier. Raven looked just as stunned as I was, and for once there was even a trace of embarrassment on her face. Before either of us could say anything, Mom spoke up. Montrell, why are you just standing there? Come say hello to Miss Denise. Good evening, Miss Denise, I greeted politely. Good evening. Come on in and have a seat. Mom seemed genuinely delighted with this young woman and wasted no time bringing up the subject that had clearly been on her mind. She acted as if the only thing left to decide was when the wedding should be. Denise smiled and suggested that the decision should depend on what the two of us thought. I sat there wondering how the conversation had escalated so quickly. This felt completely different from every blind date Mom had arranged before. I couldn't understand why she was suddenly so eager to accept this girl as her future daughter-in-law. Dad, meanwhile, stayed quiet as always, content to support whatever Mom decided. My mind filled with questions one after another. Seeing me sit there without saying a word, Mom secretly nudged my leg under the table, practically ordering me to react. The atmosphere felt so awkward that I picked up my glass and took a sip of water before finally turning toward Raven. So, what's your name? And how old are you? She hesitated for a moment, then answered softly, My name is Raven. I'm 18 years old. I wasn't surprised, considering we had already met before. With a faint smile, I turned to Mom and said, She's only 18. She's too young to get married. Mom replied immediately, Who said anything about getting married right away? You can get engaged first and spend time getting to know each other. After she graduates, then you can think about the wedding. I still wasn't convinced. Isn't that moving a little too fast? You're already 30, Mom shot back. By the time she's older, you'll be even older. Besides, you'll have an entire year to get to know your future wife. I let out an awkward laugh. You're calling her my future wife already? Mom looked at me as if I were being ridiculous. Of course. She's pretty, well-mannered, and such a lovely girl. Then she asked, Wait, have you two met before? Raven and I answered at exactly the same time. No. Every pair of eyes at the table immediately turned toward us. The rest of dinner passed surprisingly peacefully. Raven hardly spoke unless someone addressed her directly, and when she did, her voice was gentle and polite. Looking at her more carefully, I noticed how beautiful she actually was. With her long hair falling past her chest, bright eyes, softly arched brows, and calm expression, she seemed graceful and refined. I couldn't help thinking that maybe I should reconsider my first impression. Throughout the meal, she carried herself with elegance, which made it even harder to reconcile this version of her with the stubborn girl who had argued with me over a cafe seat. Just when everyone was deep in conversation, Denise smiled and suggested, The kids have finished eating. Why don't we let them go out together for a while? We'll only get in the way if they stay here with us. Mom immediately agreed. Raven and I exchanged a glance, then looked back at our parents as they urged us to spend some time alone. All right, Raven said politely. We'll be going now. We had barely stepped outside when we could still hear Mom praising Raven to Denise without holding back. The compliments followed us all the way down the hallway until the voices gradually faded into the distance. When we reached my SUV, I opened the passenger door for her. Go ahead. She smiled politely and said, Thank you, but this is far enough. I looked at her in confusion. What do you mean, this is far enough? There were no parents around anymore, and just like that, the well-behaved young lady from dinner disappeared. The familiar stubborn streak was back. I let out a quiet laugh and curled my lips into a teasing smile. She frowned immediately. What's with that attitude? Funny, I replied. You seemed awfully sweet a few minutes ago. She crossed her arms. I've been talking to you perfectly politely this whole time. Before I could answer, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and picked up. Hello? Yeah, I'm listening. I'll come over now. I know. Mom won't find out. After ending the call, she looked at me and said, Here's the deal. I know you don't like me, and honestly, I'm not exactly your biggest fan either. So let's each do our own thing. We can just tell our parents we spent the evening together. I shook my head. Who gave you the authority to decide that? Then what do you want? She asked. Your mom and my parents entrusted you to me tonight. If something happens while you're off on your own, I'm the one who'll be held responsible. Get in the car and text your boyfriend that you're busy. No, I'm not doing that. I held the door open and gestured toward the seat. Please. She stamped her foot in frustration before finally pulling out her phone and sending the message. Watching her give in almost made me laugh. Truthfully, I could have let her leave, but seeing her so annoyed was strangely satisfying. Maybe this was my petty little revenge for how she had stolen my seat at the bookstore cafe. I really was acting like a mean old guy. Once we got on the road, I realized I had no idea where to drive, so I glanced over and asked, Where do you want to go? She instantly objected to the nickname I'd used for her, but I only smiled. For some reason, teasing this girl put me in an unusually good mood. Maybe there was just something different about her. It suddenly occurred to me that I hadn't been to the movies in ages, so I asked if she wanted to see a newly released film. Not interested, she answered at first, then added a second later. But since you're paying, I guess I can make an exception. You said that, I replied with a grin. Let's go. We lined up to buy tickets and snacks. I suggested getting one bucket of popcorn because I hardly ate any, but she insisted on buying her own because she didn't want to share with me. I couldn't help thinking she was doing it just to make me spend more money. It got even worse when I stepped away to use the restroom and trusted her to hold onto the tickets. She walked inside without me and left me standing outside until I practically begged an usher to help me get in. Only then did she hand the tickets back. During the movie, she laughed out loud without caring who heard, waving her hands around so enthusiastically that she nearly bumped the seats around us. People kept glancing in our direction while I sank lower and lower into my chair, wishing the film would end already. At last, the credits rolled, and I was more than ready to leave. Just when I thought we were finally heading home, Raven looked at me and said, You know what? I suddenly feel like getting some coffee. I let out a helpless sigh. Please, just let me take you home. She tilted her head and smiled. If you do, I'll tell our moms you cut the night short. She knew exactly how to corner me. The moment she brought my mother into it, I knew I had already lost. Fine, I muttered. Where do you want to go? The bookstore cafe. Works for me. She looked genuinely excited. As expected, the moment we arrived, she walked straight to the table beside the row of trees, the very spot I usually like to sit. Without even looking at the menu, she ordered a fresh orange juice and a strawberry pastry for me. Then she pointed at me and added, and an iced latte for him. Once the server walked away, we were left sitting beneath the gentle evening breeze. Loose strands of her hair drifted across her face as she quietly gazed around the garden. After a while, her eyes shifted toward me. Curious, I asked, why do you like sitting here so much? She smiled faintly. Because it's peaceful, it's beautiful, it's quiet, and whenever I have too much on my mind, I come here and let the wind carry my worries away. I nodded. I understand. Whenever I'm stressed or even when I'm in a good mood, I end up here too. She wrapped both hands around her glass. I come when I'm sad. That sounds awfully poetic for someone your age. I teased. What could an 18-year-old possibly have to be sad about? Her expression dimmed. After taking a small sip of juice, she answered softly, Matters of the heart. She fell silent after that, staring into the distance. Realizing I had touched on something painful, I changed the subject. So what are you planning to do after graduation? Her face brightened almost instantly. I'm not going to college. I want to study pastry arts. That's a good plan. College isn't the only path. As long as you know what you want, that's what matters. She leaned forward with growing excitement. After I finish school, I'm going to open my own bakery. I want it to have a simple vintage look, with a blue front door, pale yellow walls, and warm wooden shelves everywhere. She kept talking while I simply listened, completely drawn into the dream she was painting. There was something priceless about the hopes young people carried inside them, and no one should ever take that away. Looking at her, I caught a glimpse of the person I used to be, someone who only needed a little understanding and encouragement. I was so lost in thought that she lightly tapped my arm. Hey, are you listening? I blinked and looked back at her. Sorry, she smiled. Anyway, finish your drink. I still have homework waiting for me when I get home. Then she added, since we know each other now, shouldn't we at least exchange phone numbers? I handed her my phone, and she entered hers before giving it back. By the time we left the cafe, the atmosphere between us had changed completely. She chatted the entire drive, pointing excitedly at one shop after another as we passed through the city. Watching her enthusiasm, I couldn't help thinking how innocent and carefree she seemed. While we were driving back, her cheerful mood vanished the moment a new message appeared on her phone. I figured it had something to do with her boyfriend, so I didn't pay much attention at first. A few moments later, though, I noticed her quietly wiping tears from her eyes. Hey, what's wrong? I asked. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but we're almost at your house. She didn't answer. She simply kept staring out the window, brushing away the tears as if she hoped I wouldn't notice. The silence inside the car felt heavier with every passing minute. When we finally pulled up in front of her home, she stepped out without saying goodbye and walked straight inside. I sat there for a while before driving away, unable to stop thinking about what had happened. Why had she cried so suddenly? If it really was because of her relationship, why would she stay in something that hurt her that much? The questions followed me all the way home. Even after I got back, thoughts of Raven refused to leave my mind. I picked up my phone more than once, tempted to send her a message and ask if she was okay, but every time I stopped myself. Her personal life was her own, and I had no right to pry. In the end, I put the phone down and went to bed, deciding to leave it alone. Today, for some reason, I found myself missing the bookstore cafe more than usual. It had been 3 or 4 days since I last saw Raven, and I hadn't stopped by once during that time. The familiar atmosphere welcomed me back as I settled into my usual chair, letting the cool spring breeze wash over me. I glanced around the cafe, wondering if she might already be here, but there was no sign of her. I couldn't help thinking about that night and what might have happened to her afterward. Just then, the little bell above the entrance chimed as someone pushed the door open. It was Raven. The first thing she did after stepping inside was glance toward my usual table, almost as if she expected to find me there. I was certain of it because I would have done the same. The moment she noticed me, she pretended not to. I figured she would walk over and sit across from me like before, but instead she headed to the table by the window. She still looked downcast. Curious, I watched to see what she would do, only to find her slipping on a pair of headphones and quietly swaying to the music. I hadn't done anything to upset her, so I couldn't understand why she was acting as though she were angry with me. I walked over to the counter, bought an extra fruit plate, carried it to her table, and set it down before taking the seat across from her. She continued to ignore me as if I weren't even there. Finally, I said, "The least you could do is say hello." She looked at me without speaking and went right back to listening to her music. I gently pulled one side of her headphones away and asked, "Are you mad at me or something?" Only then did she respond. "What do you want? You already told your mom that we're not a good match, didn't you? So you don't have to worry about me." "That's fine," I replied. "But is something bothering you? Is it because of what happened the other day?" She shook her head. "It's nothing. Don't worry about it." She really was an unusual girl. One moment cheerful, the next completely distant, as if she were a different person altogether. There was no point staying when all I received was cold silence, so I eventually got up to leave. No wonder Mom hadn't mentioned her in days. I assumed this matchmaking attempt had ended the same way all the others had. Even so, I couldn't focus on my book. I spent the entire time secretly watching her, noticing how often she sighed and how sad she seemed. I thought about leaving her there and going home, but my conscience wouldn't let me. As the evening wore on, customers gradually drifted out until only the two of us remained. Finally, the owner walked over and apologized. "I'm sorry, but it's closing time." At last, Raven stood up to leave. Seeing how late it had become, I didn't feel comfortable letting her walk home alone, so I offered, "It's getting late. Let me drive you home." She gave me a polite smile and shook her head. "Thank you, but I'd rather take a walk. You should head home." With that, she walked right past me as if I were invisible. I got into my SUV and slowly followed behind her from a distance, figuring I might as well play the role of an unwilling bodyguard. The farther she walked, the quieter the streets became. There were fewer and fewer people around until only the streetlights lit the road ahead. She never once realized I was behind her, completely absorbed in the music playing through her headphones and paying no attention to her surroundings. Then, without warning, a tall man wearing dark sunglasses and a long black leather coat jumped out in front of her. He yanked the coat open, exposing himself completely. Raven screamed and covered her eyes in terror. I threw my door open, rushed over, and landed several hard punches before the man turned and ran for his life. I pulled Raven into my arms, but she recoiled in panic. "It's me," I said quickly. "It's okay. I'm here." The moment she recognized my voice, she looked up at me, and the fear she had been holding back came pouring out. She broke down crying. I gently patted her head and tried to calm her. "You're safe now. He's gone. Come on, let me take you home. I warned you earlier." She gave a small nod and wiped away the tears that kept rolling down her pale face. Even after getting into the car, she still looked shaken, so I chose not to ask any more questions. By the time we arrived at Raven's house, Denise was already standing outside, waiting for her. The moment Raven stepped out of the car, Denise scolded her. "Young lady, you should be focused on school. Where have you been this late?" Then she noticed me getting out of the SUV and her expression immediately softened. "Oh, so you were with Montrell," I quickly explained. "We just happened to run into each other tonight. Raven encountered a man exposing himself on the street, so I brought her home." Denise's face instantly filled with alarm. "What? Are you okay?" She turned to Raven. "I warned you before, but you never listen. You've seemed so distracted lately." Raven didn't answer. She walked straight into the house and headed upstairs without another word. Denise let out a helpless sigh before turning back to me. "Come inside and have a cup of tea before you go. It's getting late. I should probably head home and let you rest." She shook her head. "I'm in no mood to sleep anyway. Sit with me for a little while." I finally agreed. A few minutes later, she placed a steaming cup of tea in front of me. The fragrance filled the room as I took a sip before asking, "Has something happened to Raven?" Denise sighed deeply. Ever since she started dating that boy, her grades have slipped, and she's become completely emotionally attached to him. I tried to stop the relationship, but ever since then she's been like this. I hesitated before replying, "She's grown up now. Maybe she should be allowed to make her own decisions. She'll eventually figure out what's right for her." Denise slowly shook her head. "I know, but that young man isn't good for her. He works construction, spends his time drinking, and lives recklessly. He's good with words and knows exactly how to charm girls. Raven is still too innocent to see through him. I'm worried sick." I nodded. "Then maybe just keep talking to her patiently. If you push too hard, it might only make things harder on her." "You're right," Denise said quietly. "And thank you for tonight. I don't even want to imagine what could have happened if you hadn't been there." I stood up and smiled politely. "It's getting late, so I should head home. I have work tomorrow." Denise walked me to the front gate before turning back toward the house. After Denise went back inside, I remained standing at the gate for a moment. My eyes drifted up toward Raven's bedroom window, where the light was still on and the curtains swayed gently in the evening breeze. The more I thought about it, the more annoyed I became. After everything that had happened tonight, she hadn't even thanked me once. I started the engine and slowly pulled away from the curb. Just as the SUV began rolling down the street, I glanced into the rearview mirror and caught sight of her. Raven was standing quietly by the window, watching my car disappear into the distance. Maybe she was simply too shy to say the words out loud, but the look in her eyes felt like an unspoken thank you. I was having lunch at a pizza place when I happened to glance through the large front window and spotted Raven outside. Talk about a small world. We seemed to run into each other everywhere. I almost got up to invite her inside, but then I noticed she looked as though she was waiting for someone. She was holding a pizza box in her hands and remained there for quite a while before a young man finally arrived and sat down across from her. He wore a black baseball cap, a purple button-down shirt, had tattoos covering his arms, dyed red hair, and dark skin. Judging from Denise's description, I guessed this had to be the construction worker she'd warned me about. I didn't like judging people by appearances alone, but there was something rough and disrespectful about the way he carried himself. I couldn't understand how a girl like Raven could be so deeply in love with someone like him. I stayed where I was and quietly watched what happened next. Raven opened the pizza box, picked up a slice, and gently held it out for him. She was smiling so brightly, paying attention to him in every little way. Instead of accepting it, he slapped her hand aside, sending the slice onto the ground. I expected her to explode the way she usually did, but she froze for a second, picked up another slice, and softly said, "Maybe you didn't want that one. Here, try this piece instead. It tastes even better." He pushed it away again. "No, I'm not eating it." She looked at him with pleading eyes. "I really do care about you. Please don't be like this," he answered coldly. "If you truly loved me, you wouldn't have kept me waiting this long." Raven lowered her voice. "But I'm still in school. What if something happened?" He shrugged without a trace of concern. "Then break up with me." With that, he stood up and walked away, leaving her sitting there with the untouched slice still in her hand, crying in complete silence. The sight made my blood boil. How could she shed tears over a guy like that in the middle of the street without caring who was watching? I wanted nothing more than to track him down and punch him myself. Instead, I walked outside and took the empty seat beside her. She looked at me in surprise, her eyes wide. "What are you doing here?" "I was having lunch inside," I replied, nodding toward the restaurant. "When I saw you like this, I couldn't just stay there." The moment I finished speaking, she broke down completely and cried against my shoulder. I had no clever words to offer, so I simply let her lean on me until she calmed down. After a while, she whispered, "Thank you." Then she pushed the pizza box toward me. "Will you eat this with me?" I nodded before saying quietly, "If something hurts this much, sometimes it's okay to let it go." She lowered her head. "He's my first love. He was there for me when everyone at school pushed me away. But he's changed. Did he buy you anything on your anniversary?" "No? Valentine's Day?" She shook her head. "No. What about your birthday?" She fell silent, and tears welled up again. I gently patted her head. "I don't know what request made him so angry with you, but I think you should seriously reconsider staying with him." She didn't answer, but I could tell my words had reached the deepest part of her pain. Right then, her phone lit up with a new message. I glanced over and saw the screen. "Tonight, 7 p.m. room 215 at the Bayside Inn on Westheimer Road. If you don't show up, we're done." I had no idea what to do after seeing that message. Part of me wanted to tell Denise and make sure Raven stayed home that night, but what if the threat meant nothing and I only made the situation worse? The entire drive back, I couldn't stop worrying about whether she would actually meet that worthless guy. Somehow, this girl kept giving me reasons to worry. Maybe I pitied her more than I blamed her. She was young, heartbroken, and trapped in the hands of someone who knew exactly how to manipulate her feelings. In the end, I turned the car around and drove to the motel he had mentioned, deciding to keep an eye on things from outside. I didn't know when I had started acting like some overprotective uncle, but there I was, sitting in the parking lot watching the entrance. By 7:30, I still hadn't seen Raven, and I finally let myself relax. Just as I was about to leave, she suddenly burst out through the front doors, clutching the collar of her shirt with one hand and her purse with the other, running as fast as she could. A second later, her boyfriend came charging after her with his shirt off, grabbed at her arm, and tried to stop her. I couldn't hold back anymore. I jumped out of the SUV, punched him several times, and pointed straight at him. "If you ever try to take advantage of my niece again, I'll call the police and make sure you pay for it." My raised voice drew the attention of everyone nearby. Terrified, he scrambled to his feet and ran away. Raven collapsed onto the pavement in tears. I wrapped my arms around her and said softly, "I'm here now. Come on, let's get you into the car." I helped her into the passenger seat, fastened her seatbelt, then slammed my fist against the steering wheel in frustration. "Tell me the truth. Did he do anything to you? I'll go find him right now." She grabbed my hand in panic and quickly shook her head. "No, he didn't. I got scared and ran before anything happened." I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. "Good. Then leave him behind. He's nothing but a manipulative creep who wanted to use you. You're still young, and one day you'll meet someone who truly deserves you." She nodded quietly. "I know. After tonight, I'm done with him." "Good," I said. "Now let me take you home." She looked out the window and whispered, "Not yet. I don't want to go home right now. Then where do you want to go? Would you drive around with me for a while? Of course. I drove aimlessly through the streets of Houston while Raven sat quietly beside me. She watched couples walking hand in hand along the sidewalks and, before long, tears began slipping down her cheeks again. This time, she wiped them away herself. I knew she was trying to let go of her first love and all the memories they had shared. I didn't interrupt or try to comfort her. Sometimes the only way to move forward was to face the pain head-on and choose to walk away without regrets. When we reached the waterfront, she turned to me and asked softly, "Could we stop here for a minute? I want to look at the water." "Of course," I replied, pulling over. The moment she stepped out of the SUV, she took a deep breath and shouted toward the river. "From today on, Raven is going to live for herself." As soon as the words left her mouth, she smiled with genuine relief. Without realizing it, I found myself smiling too. A second later, she skipped over, grabbed my arm, and swung it playfully. "Now I'm starving. Let's go get something to eat over there." "I'm hungry too," I laughed. "Lead the way." We walked to a nearby food stand, and she enthusiastically placed the order. 2 skewers of meatballs, 2 orders of quail eggs, 3 servings of fried tofu, 2 bowls of soup, and don't forget the tacos! I stared at her. "Why are you ordering so much?" She grinned. "Because you need to eat well if you're going to help someone forget a broken heart and get back to studying." Fair enough. She burst into laughter, her eyes narrowing into happy little crescents. The feisty girl I had first met at the bookstore cafe was back again, except now she seemed more adorable than difficult. I realized I liked seeing her smile like this. She kept eating happily, as if she hadn't enjoyed a proper meal in ages. Then she suddenly froze. "Oh no! What happened?" "I left my wallet at the motel," I sighed. "Then we'll go back and get it." She looked embarrassed. "I really don't want to." Honestly, neither do I. In the end, I pulled on a face mask before walking into the lobby to ask the front desk if anyone had turned in a lost wallet. They checked and told me no wallet had been found. Raven still didn't believe it, so she went in herself to ask, only to receive the exact same answer. Then her expression changed, and she looked at me with an awkward smile. "Curious," I asked. "What is it?" She rubbed the back of her neck. "Actually, I left my wallet at home." The rest of the drive home was completely different from the beginning of the evening. Raven chatted nonstop, humming little tunes, telling me stories about school, her classmates, and all the funny things that happened during the day. It was only then that I realized she wasn't a particularly strong student. Looking at her now, I couldn't help thinking she had probably wanted to break up with that guy many times before but had never found the courage to do it. Tonight, she had finally reached her limit and chosen to free herself from a relationship that was never going to have a happy ending. I was genuinely glad to see her becoming herself again. When we arrived at her house, she didn't forget to wave goodbye before heading inside. Oddly enough, I found myself in a wonderful mood too. Ever since I met this girl, I'd felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility toward her. Or maybe responsibility wasn't the right word anymore. Maybe I simply wanted to be there for her. Not long after I got home, my phone buzzed with a text from Raven. "Thank you for today. Thank you for everything." I read the message over and over with a grin on my face before quickly replying, "You don't have to thank me. If you ever need anything, just give me a call." I found myself whistling a love song in the shower, and that was when the truth finally hit me. I was in love. I had fallen for a high school girl, the same stubborn young woman who had once argued with me over a seat at my favorite bookstore cafe. I had made up my mind. I was going to pursue Raven and spend the rest of my life protecting the innocence and kindness that made her so special. Ever since everything we had been through together, she seemed to have grown much closer to me. She opened up more easily and even started texting me first on a regular basis. Today, she invited me out to help her unwind after weeks of stressing over her upcoming high school graduation exams, which, according to her, weren't going very well. Right on time, I arrived at Denise's house. Instead of driving my usual SUV, I showed up on my father's old car. I couldn't help wondering whether a girl her age would mind riding something so outdated when young people these days often cared so much about appearances. Denise welcomed me inside with a bright smile. Throughout our conversation, she laughed warmly and seemed happier than I had ever seen her. "I never thought she'd actually break up with that boy," she admitted. "And now she's even willing to spend time with you. I'd be overjoyed if you two ended up together. Raven told me everything. I truly appreciate everything you've done for her." I nodded politely. Honestly, when we first met, I thought she was too young for me to consider anything serious. But somehow fate kept putting us in each other's path whenever she was going through a difficult time. Before I realized it, my heart had already chosen her. So with your permission, I'd like the chance to pursue her. Denise beamed. Of course. I couldn't ask for anyone better. I trust you with Raven completely. She's changed so much since you came into her life. Just then, Raven appeared at the top of the staircase, dressed entirely in white. She descended one step at a time, her softly curled hair framing her face, and something inside me stirred awake. I rose from my seat without even thinking, completely captivated as I watched her walk toward me. She caught me staring, covered her mouth with a shy smile, and said, "Come on, let's go." Denise clapped her hands together happily. "Go on, you two. Don't stay here until it gets late." I snapped out of my daze and stammered, Right, let's go." Both mother and daughter laughed at my embarrassment while I stood there wishing I could disappear. After saying goodbye to Denise, I helped Raven onto the car and we set off together. Strangely enough, I found myself more nervous than she was. I managed employees and multi-million-dollar projects without hesitation, yet sitting beside this young woman left me shy and tongue-tied. It felt exactly like the beginning of a first love. I swallowed hard while trying to calm my nerves. Raven noticed immediately and kept smiling to herself until she finally burst into laughter. Embarrassed, I asked, "What's so funny?" She looked at me with amusement. "You're so tense that I can't help laughing." "Really?" I shot back. "Where's that serious 30-year-old man you used to complain about?" Then she casually called me on instead of the distant form of address she had always used before. The moment the word left her mouth, Raven's face flushed red. She stopped laughing and turned forward, sitting as properly as she could. Seeing the perfect opportunity, I teased her right back. "So, does that mean you like me that much already?" She stayed completely silent. "Why aren't you answering?" Instead of waiting for a reply, I pulled the car to the side of the road, leaned toward her, and kissed her. The unexpected gesture left her frozen with wide, startled eyes. Looking straight at her, I quietly confessed, "I love you." A gentle smile spread across her face as she wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "I love you too. Thank you for staying by my side when I needed someone the most." In that instant, all I wanted was to shout to the whole world that I finally had a girlfriend. I had never dated casually or treated relationships lightly. I always believed they should lead to marriage, but with this extraordinary young woman, I suddenly wanted to marry her as soon as possible. I couldn't even explain my own thoughts. I simply wanted her to be mine, to protect her from anyone who might hurt her, and to make sure no other man could ever take her away. The rest of the day was filled with laughter. We watched a movie, shared dinner, and wandered through the lively streets together. On the drive back, I could no longer keep my thoughts to myself and was about to bring up marriage when she spoke first. "Let's get married." I slammed on the brakes in surprise and turned to look at her. She stared back in alarm. "Why did you stop so suddenly? What if there had been a car behind us?" "I'm sorry," I said, still stunned. "I was so surprised, I'm not sure I heard you correctly." "What did you just say?" She repeated it without hesitation. I said, "Let's get married." "Yes," I answered immediately. I was already thinking the same thing. "I wanted to ask you myself, but I never imagined you'd say it first." She lowered her eyes with a shy smile. "I can't really explain it either. I just know I want to be with you. Then I'll talk to my parents," I promised. "And I'll come speak with your mom as well." She looked at me with quiet happiness, and I said softly, "Thank you for coming into my life." Tears gathered in her eyes and rolled gently down her cheeks. I reached over and brushed them away. "From now on, I'm going to give you every happiness I can and spend my life protecting you." Even though it was already past 11 that night, I couldn't wait until morning. The moment I got home, I walked straight to my parents' bedroom and knocked on the door. My father, Leonard, answered with sleepy eyes and frowned at me. "Are you planning to let your mother and me get any sleep tonight?" From the bed, Mom, Zuri, was only half awake when she called out, "Your father's right. We're not young anymore." I grinned and blurted out, "You're about to have a daughter-in-law." Dad instantly looked wide awake, while Mom sat upright and hurried over to grab my hands. "Are you serious? You're finally getting married? Who is she? We'll go ask for her hand right away. I laughed. So you're not sending me back to my room anymore? This is much more important, Mom replied without missing a beat. Now tell us who it is. I teased her for another second before giving in. It's Raven, Denise's daughter. Dad looked surprised. Weren't you against it before? Things are different now, I answered. We both want to get married. Mom clapped her hands with excitement. That's wonderful. Not only are you finally willing to settle down, but it's Denise's daughter too. I have to call her first thing tomorrow. I smiled and headed upstairs while my parents continued chatting happily downstairs. Hearing them so overjoyed filled me with relief. It meant the people I loved accepted our relationship wholeheartedly. I truly believed fate had brought Raven and me together. It was funny to think that the same girl who once argued with me over a seat at the bookstore cafe would soon become part of my family. Before going to sleep, I sent her a message. I told my parents about us. They're thrilled. A reply came almost immediately. My mom's really happy too. I think she's talking to your mom on the phone right now. Really? I typed back. They seem even more excited than we are. Thank you, I added. She responded with a laughing emoji and wrote, What are you thanking me for? I should be thanking you. If we keep thanking each other like this, we'll still be doing it by sunrise, I joked. Then I asked, What kind of wedding do you want? Her answer came quickly. I want our wedding photos taken in a beautiful studio. I want the reception to have a Korean-inspired style. I want lots of pink flowers everywhere, and I want you wearing a sharp black tuxedo. I kept imagining every detail she described until I drifted off to sleep without realizing it. The next morning, the ringing of my phone jolted me awake. Hello? Boss, don't forget today's meeting, Marcus reminded me. I shot upright in bed. Oh no, I almost overslept. Thanks for calling. No problem, I laughed to myself. I had been so happy the night before that I completely forgot about the important meeting waiting for me. I hurried to the office, grateful that Marcus had called to wake me up. In many ways, he was more like a younger brother than an assistant. He was dependable, thoughtful, and always seemed to appear whenever I needed help. We had worked side by side for years, successfully completing one project after another, and he had even offered advice more than once when it came to matters of the heart. The meeting itself didn't go as smoothly as I had hoped. It wasn't a disaster, but it certainly wasn't my best performance either. As everyone was leaving, Marcus caught up with me and said, Boss, what happened today? Your presentation wasn't nearly as convincing as usual. Darius ended up gaining the upper hand. I let out a quiet sigh. That's my fault. I was busy yesterday and didn't prepare as well as I should have. Marcus glanced across the room. You can tell he's pleased with himself. I think he's aiming for your position, I nodded. I know. After a brief silence, I looked at him and smiled. Marcus, I'm getting married. He stopped walking and stared at me in disbelief. Seriously? I thought you didn't even have a girlfriend. It happened quickly, I admitted. We kept running into each other whenever she was going through difficult times. She also happens to be the daughter of one of my mother's closest friends. Our families introduced us, but at first, neither of us was interested. Marcus blinked. Then what changed? Fate, I guess. I couldn't stand by and ignore what she was going through. Little by little, those feelings turned into something deeper, and now we've decided to get married after our very first real date. He laughed in amazement. That's unbelievable, boss. So what does she do? She's still in high school. Marcus looked completely stunned. You're joking. I shook my head. I'm serious. I always thought she was too young, so I never planned to pursue her. But somehow I ended up wanting to marry her anyway. He burst into laughter. That sounds just like you. When you finally make a move, you skip every step and head straight for marriage. Despite the disappointing meeting, talking about Raven put me back in a good mood. The only thing on my mind now was speaking with both families about the wedding. That afternoon, I rushed home to pick up my parents before heading to Denise's house. We even prepared gifts in advance for the formal visit. When we arrived, Denise welcomed us warmly at the front door, while Raven was already inside arranging tea and fruit for everyone. Once we had all settled into our seats, Mom got straight to the point. Denise, when do you think would be the best time for the wedding? Denise smiled before answering, I was thinking we should let Raven finish her high school graduation exams first. After that, we can hold the ceremony. Mom nodded immediately. That sounds perfect. Denise hesitated for a moment and then added, There's just one condition. Everyone looked at her. Montrell has to help Raven pass those exams first. She's really struggling in school. Mom laughed softly. That won't be a problem, right, Montrell? I let out a relieved breath, smiled, and answered without hesitation. Of course. You have my word. I'll help her prepare and make sure she passes. Wonderful, Denise replied. Then let's stop talking business and have dinner together. Raven and I exchanged cheerful smiles across the room while both families looked on with obvious delight. I gently reached for her hand and lowered my voice. From now on, I'm your teacher, so you'd better listen to everything I say. She pouted playfully. Who says I have to? Your mom already approved it, I teased. That means we both have to work hard. She finally nodded. All right, I'll do my best. Good. We'll start studying tomorrow. Her eyes widened. Tomorrow? That soon? The exams are getting close. If we wait any longer, we'll run out of time. Okay, she answered obediently. At that moment, Denise called from the kitchen. You too! Come eat before everything gets cold! Raven and I answered at exactly the same time. We're coming! Right on schedule, I showed up at Raven's house to play the role of her reluctant tutor. I had to admit that my future wife was an unbelievably poor student. I could explain something 1 minute, and she would forget it the next. Even the most basic equations tripped her up. Watching her repeat the same mistake over and over pushed my patience to the limit. Without thinking, I flicked her lightly on the forehead. It wasn't hard enough to hurt much, but it was enough to make tears immediately fill her eyes. She sat there crying without stopping until I finally raised my voice. Raven, stop pouting for a second. I'm sorry, but you have to concentrate. This isn't just for your future. It's for ours too. She didn't argue. Instead, she quietly stood up, grabbed her jacket, and walked outside. I hurried after her. I knew she was under enormous pressure and genuinely struggling because she had fallen behind in school for so long. Expecting her to catch up overnight was unrealistic, and I regretted letting my frustration get the better of me. I gently reached for her small hand. She didn't pull away. We walked together in silence until I finally spoke. I know this is difficult, but I promise I'll keep helping you, and I won't lose my temper again. Just promise me you'll keep trying with me. She nodded softly. I promise. I stepped in front of her, crouched down, and turned my back. Come on, climb up. Let your husband carry you. She hesitated. I'm embarrassed. I laughed quietly. Why? I'm your future husband. Blushing, she slowly wrapped her arms around my shoulders and climbed onto my back. I carried her home, and from that day on, we continued studying together. As the days passed, I could see how hard she was working. She made fewer mistakes with every lesson until I felt she was finally ready for the graduation exam. I believed in her completely. The night before the test, I reminded her, check every answer carefully before moving on. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning. She smiled and nodded. I will. I'll do my best. Good night. Sleep well, my wife. My alarm rang at 5 o'clock the next morning. I dragged myself out of bed, still half asleep, but there was no way I was going to oversleep on such an important day. I grabbed my phone and called Raven to make sure she was awake before heading to her house. Right on time, she stepped outside, looking confident and full of energy, which eased my worries. I drove her to the high school where the graduation exam was being held, wished her luck, and waited in the parking lot after she went inside. We had stayed up studying the night before, so I eventually dozed off in the driver's seat without realizing it. A while later, someone tapped on the window and called my name. I opened my eyes in surprise to find Raven smiling at me from outside the car. I had only meant to rest for a moment, yet it was already close to 11. She had finished the exam. I rolled down the window and immediately asked, "How did it go? Were you able to answer everything?" She grinned mischievously. "Why don't you guess? You did well, didn't you?" She nodded happily. "That's right." I jumped out of the car and wrapped her in a hug. "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you." Then she laughed and added, "That's just how I feel. We won't know for sure until the results come out." "If you're this confident, then I believe you," I replied. "Come on, let's go celebrate and help you unwind." She climbed onto the car with obvious excitement, smiling and chatting the entire time as though a huge weight had finally been lifted from her shoulders. I realized she always handled life the same way. Whenever she was worried, she kept everything bottled up inside, but the moment she was happy, she became endlessly talkative. While we were out, I asked, So what do you want to do after graduation? She answered without hesitation. I'm not going to college. I'm not good at academics. I want to study pastry arts instead. I nodded thoughtfully. If that's truly what you love, then I'll support you. Still, continuing your education has its benefits. She shook her head. I don't want to feel tied down anymore. I want to follow my passion. I smiled. All right, take a little time to rest first, and then I'll help you enroll in a pastry program. A few days later, while I was at work with Marcus, my phone suddenly rang. It was Raven. I answered immediately. Hey, I'm here. Her excited voice came through the speaker before I could say anything else. I passed! I passed the exam! A huge smile spread across my face. Really? That's incredible! My wife did it! Now we can start getting ready for our wedding! She laughed happily. I'm so excited. I'm proud of you, I told her sincerely. I'm proud of you too, she replied. After we hung up, I could barely contain my excitement. All the hard work we had put in together had finally paid off. I grabbed Marcus by the shoulders and shook him with a grin. He looked at me in confusion before asking, She passed? She did, I answered. Then you'd better start setting aside some money for the wedding, I joked. Marcus laughed and patted me on the back. Congratulations, boss. Our wedding day went exactly as we had dreamed. I looked sharp in a tailored black tuxedo, while Raven looked like a princess in her flowing white gown. Family members from both sides, friends, and colleagues filled the venue to celebrate with us. Because my wife had always wanted a Korean-inspired wedding, every detail, from the flowers to the color palette and decorations, was arranged according to her wishes. We ended that unforgettable day with a passionate kiss and a night spent wrapped in each other's arms. The next morning, my new bride slept until nearly 9 o'clock. Mom later told me she had deliberately let Raven rest because she knew the wedding had been exhausting and had already prepared breakfast for everyone. She gently knocked on our bedroom door and called, Are you two awake? It's getting late. Come have breakfast. Her voice was soft but enough to wake us. I answered, We'll be down in a minute, Mom. I tried to wake Raven, but she only stretched, rolled over, and drifted right back to sleep. Watching her sleepy expression made me smile. Even sleeping, she was adorable. I finally pulled her into a sitting position and whispered, Come on, it's your first day as part of the family. We can't keep Mom waiting. She rubbed her eyes, yawned, and shuffled toward the bathroom while I straightened the sheets before heading downstairs. Mom was already setting breakfast on the table, so I hurried over to help. Leave it to me, I said. She smiled. It's nothing. I do this all the time. Where's Raven? She'll be down in a minute. Yesterday wore her out, so I let her sleep a little longer. Mom nodded with understanding. I remember what that felt like. She's still young and has a lot to learn. Thanks, Mom. Please keep teaching her when she needs it. She laughed. Don't worry. I may be loving, but I can be strict too. You know me better than anyone. I've known you for over 30 years, I joked, and we both laughed. Just then, Raven came downstairs, still covering another yawn. The moment she saw Mom, she politely greeted her. Good morning, Mom. Good morning, sweetheart. Eat breakfast, then come shopping with me later. Thank you. After breakfast, Raven offered to wash the dishes. Almost immediately, we heard the unmistakable sound of a plate shattering. She turned toward Mom with an embarrassed smile. Mom reassured her, It's all right. You're probably just not used to this yet. A few seconds later, another dish slipped from her hands and broke. Mom patiently comforted her again. When Raven reached for another plate, the exact same thing happened a third time. This time, Mom didn't say a word. I quickly stepped in. Honey, why don't you throw away the broken pieces? I'll finish up here. She quietly nodded and carried the shards away, nervously sneaking a glance at Mom as she walked past. Mom only shook her head in helpless amusement. Then I looked into the sink and realized there weren't any dishes left to wash. My clumsy little wife had managed to break every last one. From that day on, Mom often took Raven shopping and tried to teach her little things around the house. According to Mom, my clumsy wife seemed to drop or bump into something everywhere she went. Even someone as patient as Mom found herself running out of words, while I could only defend Raven by saying she was probably nervous and still adjusting to married life. The pressure weighed heavily on her. As soon as she returned to our room that evening, she threw her arms around me and burst into tears. All I could do was hold her close and comfort the young woman who had been treated like a princess for most of her life and had never been expected to manage a household before becoming a wife. "I know this is hard," I whispered. "Just take it one step at a time. Mom is actually very understanding." She sniffled and nodded. "I'm just scared she'll be upset with me. Even if she scolds you, it's only because she wants to teach you." "I know." She truly tried her best. Over the next few days, she didn't break another plate, although I could tell she remained tense whenever she was alone with Mom. By night, she would collapse onto the bed and cling to me like a child looking for comfort. Everything seemed to be settling down until one morning. Just after I had left for work, I received an urgent call telling me that my father had fallen and been taken to the hospital. I rushed there as fast as I could. Raven was standing quietly in a corner with her head lowered while Mom's face was filled with anger. The moment she saw me, she said, "Look at what your wife did." She spilled cooking oil on the floor. I told her to clean it thoroughly because it was slippery, but she rushed through it and left the floor unsafe. "Your father walked across it, slipped, and broke his leg. You need to teach her to be more careful. I can't take this anymore." I immediately asked, "How's Dad?" "His leg is in a cast for the next month." I turned toward Raven, unable to hide my frustration. "What happened? How could you be this careless?" She tried to apologize, but I interrupted. "Please, just be more careful. Dad got hurt because of this." Before she could explain, a nurse announced that visitors were allowed into the room. Mom and I went inside first, leaving Raven behind. A little later, she quietly entered as well. Mom gently prompted her, "Go on, apologize to your father." Raven bowed her head. "I'm so sorry." Dad gave her a reassuring smile. "It's all right. Just be more careful next time." After that, he encouraged everyone to head home and let him rest. During the drive back, I hardly spoke to Raven at all. My attention stayed on Dad, and I was still upset about what had happened. By the time night came, I finally returned to our bedroom and realized she wasn't there. Her phone had been left inside, and after searching the house without finding her, panic started to creep in. She had already caused one major scare today, and now she had disappeared as well. Just as I was running my hands through my hair in frustration, I spotted her outside across the street, pacing back and forth while absent-mindedly kicking at the ground. Standing at the front door, I called out, "Are you planning to stay out there all night? Aren't you coming in to sleep?" Raven stopped walking and looked at me with sadness written all over her face. "You should go to bed first. I just want a little fresh air. I'll come in later." Her answer only made me more frustrated. I marched over, grabbed her by the wrist, and pulled her toward the house. The sudden movement hurt her enough that she yanked her hand away, her eyes already filling with tears. "I hate you," she shouted before running upstairs. When I entered our room a few moments later, she was lying on the bed, hugging a pillow and crying uncontrollably. The instant I saw her like that, I realized I had been wrong. I sat beside her and quietly apologized. "I'm sorry." I was exhausted and let my emotions get the better of me. She brushed my hand away when I reached toward her, so I lay down next to her instead and wrapped my arms around her gently. "I'm sorry. I was so worried about Dad that I never stopped to listen to what you were trying to say." Hearing those words, she finally turned toward me and burst into tears all over again. "You're so mean. Do you know how hard I've been trying? Do you think I wanted your dad to get hurt? I never meant for any of this to happen. You blamed me and even hurt me. You don't love me anymore." My heart sank. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't cry anymore. It hurts me to see you like this." Little by little, she calmed down and eventually fell asleep in my arms. As I looked at her tear-stained face, I realized she had suffered through her own kind of nightmare that day. I leaned over and kissed her forehead, silently promising myself that I would never lose my temper with her again. She had given up the carefree years of her youth to build a life with me. The cheerful, talkative girl I had fallen in love with had grown quieter since our wedding, and it suddenly struck me that I hadn't seen her truly laugh in a long time. Maybe married life had changed her more than I had realized. Thankfully, after Dad's accident, she never caused another serious mishap. Mom gradually let go of her anger and started talking with her normally again. Raven often told me that Mom patiently taught her little by little every day. She proudly shared that she was becoming more capable around the house, and because she loved baking, she picked up cooking surprisingly quickly. Aside from occasionally dropping or breaking something, she was doing wonderfully. About a month later, I enrolled her in a pastry program just as I had promised. She could hardly hide her excitement on the first day. I drove her to class before heading to work and picked her up that afternoon. The moment she climbed into the car, she started talking nonstop. "I did great today! I didn't drop a single thing!" I laughed. "I'm proud of you. Did you enjoy it?" "I loved it. There's even a guy in my class. He comes from a wealthy family but still wants to learn baking. His name is Jamal. He's really handsome, funny, and talented too." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you complimenting another man right in front of your husband?" She giggled. "Are you jealous?" Then she reached over and squeezed my hand. "I promise you're the only one for me. I don't have feelings for anyone else." "Good," I replied with a smile. "I'm choosing to believe my wife." Raven continued attending her pastry classes every day, and with each lesson she became even more enthusiastic. Every evening she would tell me about everything that had happened in class, and somehow Jamal's name always found its way into the conversation too. One afternoon, she decided to show everyone what she had learned by baking a strawberry cake for the whole family. We all gathered around the dining table, waiting to see what our daughter-in-law had created. The result was better than any of us expected. I had to admit that my clumsy little wife possessed a remarkable talent for baking. The cake came out of the oven with a wonderful aroma, its smooth layer of cream carrying the sweet fragrance of fresh strawberries. Mom and Dad each took a spoonful, tasted it, and immediately began praising her. For a first attempt, it was an incredible success. Looking at that cake, I couldn't help believing that the bakery she had always dreamed about might one day become a reality. More importantly, it was the first time since our wedding that I had seen Raven smile with such genuine happiness. Somehow, that simple homemade cake brought our entire family closer together. As time passed, the passion between us gradually faded. I buried myself deeper and deeper in work because Darius was openly trying to take my position as manager, and I couldn't afford to let my guard down. Most nights I came home late and heavily intoxicated after entertaining clients. Looking back, it felt as though the only time Raven and I really spoke anymore was for a few minutes each morning before the day began. The last meaningful conversation I could remember was when she had asked, "Are you coming home late again tonight?" I had brushed her off with a curt reply and walked away without another word. Once work consumed my schedule, I left home before sunrise and stopped driving her to pastry school. I didn't even know how she was getting there until one afternoon when I happened to finish early and decided to surprise her by picking her up. To my shock, I saw Jamal dropping her off. She sat behind him on the car, smiling and chatting happily. Jealousy flared instantly. I pulled in front of them, got out, and drew Raven toward me. "Who is this?" Before she could answer, she hurriedly explained, "Don't misunderstand. This is Jamal, the classmate I've told you about." Jamal stepped forward and politely offered me his hand. "I'm sorry if this looks bad. I noticed she'd been walking home, so I offered to give her a ride. That's all." The anger drained out of me as quickly as it had appeared. I overreacted. "Sorry about that." Then I turned to Raven. "Come on, I'll take you home." On the ride back, she couldn't hide her excitement that I had come to pick her up. "You got off work early today?" she asked with a bright smile. "Yeah, I wanted to come get you. I'm so happy. I finally get to spend time with my husband again." Hearing those words filled me with guilt. Somewhere along the way, I had neglected the little family we had built together. That evening, she approached me again. "Are you free this Sunday?" Jamal gave me 2 movie tickets. "Come watch it with me." "Of course," I answered automatically. Then she looked at me expectantly. "Do you remember what day it is?" I frowned, trying to think. "What day?" "It's my birthday." My heart sank. I had become so consumed by work that I had forgotten my own wife's birthday. Trying to cover my mistake, I forced a smile. "I knew that. I was only pretending to forget so I could surprise you." She looked disappointed but simply said, "Then come home early, okay?" Instead of explaining myself, I kissed her to hide my embarrassment. It had been so long since we had shared any real closeness that one kiss turned into another, and before long we found ourselves wrapped in each other's embrace once again. The morning after our brief return to happiness, Raven was as affectionate as ever. It was Sunday, but an unexpected meeting with an important client forced me to leave the house. As I got ready, she looked at me and asked, "Will you be home early?" I kissed her gently on the forehead and promised, "I will. We'll go watch that movie together." Then I hurried out the door. The client turned out to be far more difficult than expected. He insisted on drinking until everyone at the table was nearly unconscious. Fortunately, Marcus stayed sober because he had to get home to his young child, but I wasn't so lucky. I had no choice but to keep drinking until the contract was signed. At one point, my phone buzzed repeatedly, and when I finally looked at the screen, I realized it was already 7 in the evening. Raven had called several times. Knowing I couldn't leave, I closed my eyes for a moment and typed a quick message. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm stuck entertaining an important client tonight. Let's go to the movies another day." She never replied, and I reluctantly put my phone away and returned to the table. Much later, she told me what happened after that. By pure coincidence, Jamal happened to see her wandering alone near the theater. He walked over and asked, "Aren't you going in? The movie's about to start. Where's your husband?" At that question, she broke down in tears. Jamal seemed to understand immediately and tried to comfort her. "It's your birthday. Since you already have the tickets, let me watch it with you." Eventually, she agreed. While they were in the theater, Marcus called her. "Raven, you need to come here right away. Montrell is completely drunk. I don't think he's in control of himself anymore." Without hesitation, she asked Jamal to drive her to the restaurant where I was entertaining the clients. The moment she opened the private room door, she found me in a drunken haze with a half-dressed hostess draped over me while I clumsily embraced her. "Montrell!" Raven screamed. The sound of her voice cut through the haze in my mind. I looked up, recognized her, and staggered toward her, trying to hold her in my arms. She pushed me away immediately. "So this is why you stood me up on my birthday? You left me alone just to fool around with other women?" "I'm sorry," I mumbled. "I'm entertaining clients. It's not what it looks like." "Stop lying." Before I could explain another word, the client, already heavily intoxicated, grabbed my arm and tried to pull me back inside. I couldn't openly offend him without jeopardizing the contract, so I looked desperately at Raven and said, "Please go home first. I'll explain everything later. You're the worst." She turned and ran outside, collapsing on the curb in tears. On the very day that should have belonged entirely to her, I had forced her to witness something so humiliating and painful. I truly was a terrible husband. Marcus stayed behind because he knew I was no longer capable of handling the situation myself. He did everything he could to keep the client satisfied and finish signing the agreement as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Jamal remained with Raven, quietly comforting her. I had long suspected that he cared about her in a way that went beyond friendship. I could tell from all the stories she used to tell me about his kindness and the little things he did for her. That was exactly why I had become so jealous whenever I saw them together. Heartbroken and overwhelmed, Raven eventually agreed to go out drinking with him. She danced recklessly through the night, trying to drown her pain. When she became too intoxicated to make decisions, Jamal took her to a hotel because she refused to return home. I had no idea what happened between them after that. The only thing I knew was that she didn't come home until nearly noon the next day. When I finally woke from my own drunken sleep, she walked through the front door looking completely disheveled. Her clothes were wrinkled, several buttons were fastened incorrectly, one button was missing altogether, and she wasn't wearing a bra. Rage exploded inside me. "Where were you last night?" She froze in place. What did you do?" Her whole body shook. "I'm sorry. I don't remember what happened." Before I could stop myself, I slapped her across the face. She stumbled backward and fell onto the bed. The instant I saw the red mark blooming on her cheek, regret crashed over me. I had always treasured her, yet I had struck her with my own hand. None of this would have happened if I hadn't forgotten her birthday or let myself lose control while drinking. I knew Marcus had stayed behind to watch over me and had even called her. So why had she still chosen to spend the night away and return looking like this? Unable to contain my anger and confusion, I stormed out of the house, leaving her behind. From that day forward, my feelings toward Raven grew colder and colder. I barely spoke to her anymore. Despite everything, she continued attending her pastry classes because graduation was approaching, and she couldn't simply quit. Every time she left for school, all I could think about was the possibility of her seeing Jamal again. Jealousy and resentment twisted inside me until I couldn't control my words. Whenever she was about to head out the door, I would throw out sarcastic remarks like, "Off to see your special friend again?" Then I would leave for work without waiting for an answer or even looking back at her. Life became a form of quiet torture for me. I wanted to send Raven back to her mother's house, but I couldn't bring myself to do it because I still loved her too much. Instead, I chose a crueler path. I avoided her whenever I could. I didn't want my parents to learn what had happened and force her to leave, so I kept everything bottled up inside while punishing both her and myself. Looking back, I realize how selfish I was. I often stayed out until late entertaining clients, and on nights when I had no work, I would sit alone at my favorite bookstore cafe until closing time before finally heading home. I deliberately waited until I thought she had fallen asleep before returning, but one night she stayed awake until 1 in the morning just to wait for me. As soon as I walked in, she asked softly, "Are you tired? Would you like me to make you something warm to drink?" No. I walked straight into the bathroom, shut the door, and after cleaning up, climbed into bed without another word, turning my back toward her. I knew she wasn't sleeping. She kept shifting carefully beneath the covers, trying not to wake me, even though I wasn't asleep at all. I noticed her lifting her arm several times as if she wanted to hold me, only to lower it again before touching me. The shadow cast against the wall revealed every hesitant movement. Again and again she reached out, then stopped herself, never finding the courage to close the distance between us. Eventually she gave up. Just before turning away, she brushed a hand across her eyes. I could only assume she was wiping away tears. The next morning, I woke up to find Raven's phone still lying on the nightstand. She had forgotten to take it with her. Just as I was about to bring it downstairs, the screen lit up with a new message. I glanced at it without thinking, and my mood darkened immediately. It was from Jamal. "Raven, I still love you. If you're ever unhappy, I'll always be here for you." Jealousy surged through me all over again. I clenched the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. 1,000 thoughts raced through my head, but before I could dwell on any of them, I remembered that today was her final practical exam at pastry school. Without another second to waste, I grabbed the phone, rushed out the door, and drove straight toward the campus. When I arrived, she was already waiting outside. The moment she saw me, surprise flashed across her face. "You came?" she asked quietly. I held out her phone. "You forgot this." She accepted it with an embarrassed smile and thanked me. We rode to the school together in silence. Just before she got out of the car, I couldn't help reminding her, "Focus on your exam. Don't overthink anything else." She nodded gently. "I will." As I watched her disappear through the entrance, I realized that despite everything between us, I still couldn't stop worrying about her. My anger, my jealousy, and my disappointment had never managed to erase the feelings I carried for my wife. Not long after Raven finished her final exam, another piece of news turned our household upside down. She was pregnant. My parents were overjoyed the moment they found out, treating the baby as the greatest blessing our family could receive. I stood there in silence, unable to share their happiness. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop wondering whether the child she was carrying was really mine. That doubt settled deep inside my heart and refused to leave. While everyone else celebrated, I felt myself sinking further into misery. Later, consumed by anger and confusion, I ended up drinking with Naomi. One drink turned into another until reason blurred. In a moment of weakness and resentment, I crossed a line I never should have crossed. I spent the night with her, convincing myself that if Raven had betrayed me, then I had the right to hurt her in return. Even as it happened, I knew I didn't love Naomi. The only woman I had ever truly loved was my wife. Yet somehow everything between us had fallen apart beyond recognition. When dawn finally came, I drove Naomi home, my mind heavier than ever before. When I got home that evening, I noticed the dining table was covered with dishes Mom had prepared. "What's the occasion?" I asked. She looked at me in surprise. "Don't tell me you forgot. We're celebrating your wife today," I frowned. "Celebrating what?" Raven finished at the top of her class. She's been offered a position at a 5-star hotel's pastry department. I stood there speechless. I hadn't known any of it. Lately, I had been so distant from her that even something this important had escaped me. Mom glanced at me disapprovingly. "You've been neglecting your wife. She's pregnant too. You should be paying more attention to her." Without answering, I went upstairs. When I opened the bedroom door, Raven was hurriedly wiping away tears. The moment she saw me, she forced a smile. "You're home," Mom told me. I replied quietly. She nodded, but said nothing else. I walked past her, and she remained standing exactly where she was. I knew she was crying again, but I pretended not to notice. During dinner, my parents congratulated her over and over while she smiled politely through it all. I couldn't bring myself to smile. After the meal ended, She walked over to me carrying a small wrapped gift in both hands. "Please accept this," she said softly. "I bought it with my first paycheck. Thank you." I took the package and headed upstairs. Once I was sure no one could see me, I stopped halfway on the staircase and carefully opened it. Inside was a beautifully chosen light gray dress shirt. Raven had always been thoughtful when picking gifts for other people. I couldn't help smiling. I truly was happy. But no matter how much I wanted to go back to the way we used to be, the baby she was carrying remained an invisible wall between us that I could not bring myself to cross. That night, I noticed Raven tossing and turning in bed, unable to sleep. After a while, she quietly slipped out of the room and tiptoed downstairs. I followed without making a sound and watched from above. She was searching through the refrigerator for something to eat. It suddenly occurred to me that she was pregnant, and getting hungry in the middle of the night was perfectly normal. Looking at her more closely, I realized how pale and worn out she seemed. Other pregnant women had husbands who filled the house with snacks and made sure they never went hungry. Compared to them, I truly was a terrible husband. I watched her take a few oranges from the refrigerator and try to satisfy her hunger with those alone. I walked downstairs and stopped right in front of her. She was so startled that the orange slipped from her hand and fell to the floor. I looked at her and asked, "Are you that afraid of me?" She immediately shook her head. "No." "Then why did you drop your food the moment you saw me?" She quickly picked it up and answered, "I thought I woke you." My expression remained serious as I looked at her lowered face. "What do you want to eat?" She stared at me in confusion, so I repeated myself. "What do you want? I'll take you to get it." I was just hungry and wanted something to eat. "These oranges are enough. You're pregnant. You should be eating more than that. Come with me." I led her outside, and we got into the car together. Throughout the drive, she kept looking at me and smiling to herself. Seeing her so happy made me happy too. It had been a long time since I had seen her smile like that. While we were buying food, Naomi happened to spot us and walked over curiously. "Who are you buying all this for?" she asked. "My wife," I answered. "Really? I thought you had already decided you weren't going to raise another man's child. Can you stop saying that?" I replied firmly. Buying food for my wife is perfectly normal because she's my lawful wife. I knew Naomi was trying to provoke me, so I simply turned and walked away. As I left, I heard her mutter behind me, "In the end, you're still raising someone else's child." I had to admit I bought a lot. The back of the car was packed with bags of food. The more I cared for Raven, the more jealous Naomi seemed to become, but I ignored it and drove home. I carried everything upstairs for my wife. She looked at me in complete surprise. "Save these for later," I told her. "You're pregnant. If you keep trying to get by with so little, how are you supposed to stay healthy?" "Thank you," she said softly. Then she eagerly opened one package after another. Wow, cornbread, sponge cake, milk, grape candy. Oh, there are gummy candies too! She was delighted by every little thing. Watching her unpack the food reminded me of the days when she used to excitedly open presents one by one. The gifts had simply been replaced by snacks. I found myself smiling along with her, but every time she turned to look at me, I quickly put my serious expression back on. 3 more months passed, and Raven was now 5 months pregnant. Throughout all that time, she endured my indifference and emotional distance without ever complaining. Perhaps she had simply grown used to it. We barely spoke anymore except about practical matters. I had also cut off contact with Naomi because I had no desire to repeat the mistakes I had already made. Naomi, however, was furious. One day she went directly to the hotel where Raven worked and confronted her. The moment they came face to face, Raven recognized her. Although visibly shaken, she forced herself to remain calm and asked politely, "Is there something you need?" Naomi smiled and introduced herself. "I'm Naomi. I work with your husband, and I'm the woman who keeps him company every night." Raven gripped the glass in her hand so tightly that her fingers turned pale. Seeing that reaction, Naomi smirked and continued, "Don't be angry. If you can't even keep your husband from cheating, then being abandoned is only natural. He's actually being generous. He said he'd wait until after you give birth before divorcing you." Raven whispered, "You're lying." Naomi shrugged. "Then ask your husband yourself. I just thought you deserved to know." After saying that, she walked away with a satisfied smile, leaving Raven standing there in tears. Moments later, Raven became dizzy and collapsed. While I was at work, one of her coworkers called to tell me she had been rushed to the hospital. I drove there immediately and found one of the restaurant employees waiting outside her room. "You're Raven's husband, right?" he asked. "Yes. What happened?" "The doctor thinks she fainted because of exhaustion and stress. She's very weak. Please take good care of her." "Did she collapse while working?" I asked. He shook his head. "No. She spoke with another woman first, and not long afterward she passed out." "Do you know who that woman was?" "I'm sorry. I don't." I thanked him and went into the room. Raven was asleep, resting quietly in the hospital bed, her pregnancy already becoming more noticeable. Looking at her, I realized how difficult everyday life must have become for her, yet she had continued working until her body finally gave out. When she woke up, she looked at me with quiet sadness. "Are you feeling better?" I asked. "I'm fine now. Thank you." The distance in her voice caught me off guard. "Why are you thanking me? Looking after you is only natural." She simply lowered her eyes. Since she still looked exhausted, I decided not to ask any more questions and took her home so she could rest. Somehow, I completely forgot to ask about the mysterious woman her coworker had mentioned because, at the time, it didn't seem important. As the final months of Raven's pregnancy passed, she stopped working and stayed home to prepare for the baby's arrival. I continued going to work every day. Then one day, my parents called to tell me that Raven had given birth to a healthy baby boy. I rushed to the hospital, looked at the sleeping child, and found myself caught between affection and resentment. The longer I stared at him, the more I wanted to track down Jamal and punch him for what I believed he had done. Both sides of the family were overjoyed by the baby's arrival, but I stood there frozen, unsure of what to do next. Should I continue pretending nothing had happened and stay with my wife? Or should I find a way to end this painful marriage? During Raven's postpartum recovery, I spent very little time at home. Most of the responsibility for caring for her and the baby fell to my mother and her mother, while I kept my distance. At the same time, my career was thriving. The company selected me for a 3-month assignment in Dallas, with a promotion to director of sales waiting for me upon my return. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, yet I hesitated. I was torn between advancing my career, which would provide a better future for my wife and son, and staying by their side when they needed me most. It was our son's 1-month celebration, but I didn't come home until late in the afternoon. I had returned early for one reason only. I wanted to tell everyone about the assignment I had accepted. With both families gathered together, including Raven's mother, I finally spoke. "I'll be transferring to Dallas for 3 months." Mom immediately frowned. "The baby is still so young. How can you leave now?" "You and Mrs. Denise will both be here," I replied quietly. "But how can this family function without you?" she insisted. "I know," I said, "but this is an order from the company. I can't refuse it." Before anyone else could continue, Raven spoke up. "Please let him go. He should take the opportunity." Everyone turned to look at her. She continued calmly. "I have something I want to tell all of you too." She walked to the cabinet, took out a document, and handed it to me. My hands began to shake as soon as I saw the title. It was a divorce agreement. "I'd like to ask for your blessing," she said to my parents. "Thank you for taking care of me all this time. And thank you," she added as she looked at me, "for allowing our son to come safely into this world. Today, I want to give you back your freedom. I'm sorry for being a burden to you." Mom stared at her in disbelief. "Have you really thought this through?" Raven nodded. "Yes. I can't see any other way." Denise spoke up as well, apologizing to my parents and thanking them for everything they had done for her daughter. Dad sighed sadly. "Looks like I'm going to be separated from my grandson. He may not share my blood, but I've come to love him. He even reminds me of Montrell when he was little." Mom reached for Raven's hand. "No matter what happens, you'll always be a good daughter to us. Our home will always welcome you back." Raven thanked them through tears before embracing both of them. The 3 of them cried together while I sat there unable to move. Only then did I realize everyone else already knew what had happened between us. Finally, Raven turned to me and said softly, "Please sign it. I'd like to stay here just one more night. Tomorrow morning, I'll leave." I didn't say a word. I carried the divorce papers upstairs. Once again, I wanted to throw them into the trash like I had done before, but this time was different. I wasn't the one who had written them. Even if I tore up 100 copies, Raven could always prepare another. After putting our son to sleep, she returned to the bedroom and quietly began packing her belongings into a suitcase. I looked at her and finally spoke. "Please don't leave." She paused for only a moment before continuing to fold her clothes. In a calm voice, she replied, "I know you don't really want this, but you'll get used to it. You've already been doing a good job pretending I'm not here. As long as I stay by your side every day, you can't forget me." "But I don't want that." She gently shook her head. "Don't lie to yourself anymore. You've wanted a divorce for a long time. Besides, I don't want to make things difficult for you in the future. You understand that, don't you? How could you ever truly accept such a heavy burden?" I slowly sank to the floor. In that moment, I knew I had already lost her. I signed the papers, grabbed my keys, and drove away without knowing where I was going. I wandered through one street after another, crying alone behind the wheel as memories of us flooded back into my mind. Eventually, I found myself parked outside the old bookstore cafe where we had first met. Standing there, I remembered the 18-year-old girl who had once been so full of life. Somehow, I had turned that bright young woman into a single mother who had been forced to carry the weight of the world on her own. The next morning, I returned home to find the room empty. Raven was gone. She had taken all of her belongings with her, leaving behind only the phone I had once given her and a stack of cash. She hadn't said a single word before leaving. I picked up the phone and turned it on, only to discover that everything inside had been erased. There were no photos, no messages, no contacts, nothing. It looked exactly like a brand new device. Beneath the money was a small yellow note written in her handwriting. "I'm returning this phone because I don't deserve to keep it. I took good care of it until the day I gave it back to you. I'm also returning the money you spent buying food for me. I calculated everything carefully so you wouldn't lose out. I even added a little extra to cover the cost of letting me stay in your home for the past 9 months. I'll see you in court. I hope one day you meet someone better than me. I completely fell apart." "You foolish girl," I whispered to myself. "Why would I ever want that money back? I bought those things because I cared about you. I really did care about you." A knock sounded at my bedroom door. "Montrell, may I come in?" It was Mom. "Come in," I replied quietly. She walked over and handed me a notebook. "I think you need to read this." It was Raven's diary. "She accidentally left it behind," Mom explained. "I read some of it and finally understood part of what she's been going through. Before you lose the woman who truly loves you, you need to think carefully." I looked up in surprise. "You knew about everything between us?" Mom nodded. "Raven told your father and me during the final months of her pregnancy. We always knew something was wrong and kept asking until she finally opened up. I believe this all started because of mistakes on your side. You should fix them and make sure you never repeat them." "Is it already too late?" I asked. "Read the diary first," she answered. "Then decide." I opened the first pages. "Today, my husband ignored me again. I'm sad, but he's working hard for our family, so I can't be selfish. I just have to wait patiently for him to come home." Another page read, "Today I saw my husband holding another woman." The pain was unbearable. I drank until I lost control and ended up making the same mistake he did. I hate myself for becoming tainted. I hate Jamal for dragging me into this. I kept reading. My husband doesn't love me anymore. He barely speaks to me and no longer cares about me. Now I'm carrying a baby. What should I do? Should I end this pregnancy? But even if I did, nothing would ever go back to the way it was. I've already failed as a wife. I can't fail as a mother too. A later entry said, "Today he smashed my phone." I know he read Jamal's messages. They meant nothing to me, but he wrote divorce papers and then threw them away. Maybe he still loves me. What should I do? My heart can't take much more. Another page brought tears to my eyes. "Lately, I've been hungry all the time, and I don't have much money for food. Today, he took me out and bought me 2 big bowls of ramen and so many snacks. He never said it, but I know he still cares about our baby and me." Then I reached the entry about Naomi. "Today, Naomi came to see me. She said he was only letting me stay until I gave birth before divorcing me. She also said they had spent the night together. I knew that already. I saw her in his car the next morning. I was jealous. I wanted to claw at her face, but I had no right. Finally, I reached the last page. This is the final entry in my diary. I once promised myself that if I reached the last page and my story was still a sad one, I would end this painful love. Today, I handed him the divorce papers. Our son is exactly 1 month old. He never even wanted to choose the baby's name, so how could he ever accept him? Naomi was right. I can't keep him by my side anymore. By the time I finished reading, tears had soaked my shirt. Suddenly, it no longer mattered whose child the baby was. The only thing I knew with certainty was that I needed my wife. I needed Raven, no matter what. I drove straight to Raven's old house the moment I finished reading her diary. No matter how many times I rang the doorbell, no one answered. After watching me stand there for quite a while, one of the neighbors finally came over and said, "The family who used to live here moved out. The place has already been rented to someone else. Do you know where they went?" I asked desperately. "I'm afraid not. They left this morning." So she really wanted to disappear from my life without leaving me even the smallest chance. I slapped myself across the face as hard as I could. I had been given countless opportunities to make things right, yet my own selfishness had destroyed everything. I was the one who had shattered our marriage. I dragged my empty shell of a body back home. Mom could tell immediately that I had failed. She tried to comfort me. "You'll still have another chance at the divorce hearing." I shook my head. "It's too late, Mom. You can't force someone to stay when all they want is to leave." The very next day, I decided to leave for Dallas ahead of schedule. Maybe distance would help me forget. Maybe avoiding the courthouse would let me postpone the inevitable. Even if I couldn't keep Raven by my side in reality, perhaps I could hold on to the title of husband just a little longer. Where was she now? How were she and our baby doing? Those questions haunted me every single day. 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. I returned from Dallas with a promotion, a higher salary, and the career success I had chased for years. I now had status, money, and recognition, but I no longer had Raven. None of it meant anything anymore. I had spent the first 30 years of my life sacrificing love for ambition, and now it felt as though I would have to spend the next 30 years paying for that mistake. One afternoon, Marcus walked into my office carrying a small box. "Montrell, my wife and I picked up some strawberry cake yesterday. It was so good that I bought an extra one for you." "Thanks," I replied. "Try it while it's fresh," he said with a grin. The moment I took a bite, memories of Raven flooded back. She used to make strawberry cake just like this. She had always dreamed of opening a little bakery decorated in a vintage style. I missed her more than ever and wondered when, or if, she would ever return. "Where did you buy this?" I asked. "A place on Magnolia Street," Marcus answered. "The bakery is called Bitter." "Bitter?" I repeated. "That's an unusual name. I thought so too." Then Marcus lowered his voice. "By the way, Naomi's gone." "Gone?" She resigned. "Didn't you know?" Turns out she'd been involved with several male employees downstairs. Their wives showed up and caused a huge scene. She was so embarrassed she quit that very day. "I also heard she even tried to confront your wife and lecture her." I stayed silent. Technically, I hadn't fired Naomi. She had chosen to leave on her own. After Marcus walked away, I couldn't stop thinking about the cake. When work was over, I wandered through the streets until I found the bakery he had mentioned. The sign above the entrance read Bitter Bakery. I stepped inside, planning to buy a few pastries to bring home for my parents. I picked out 3 pastries and carried them to the register. The moment I looked up, I froze. Raven was standing on the other side of the counter. For a long second, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt suffocating. She was the first to break it, keeping her voice calm and professional. "That will be $10.50. I stared at her. "You really opened your own bakery?" "Yes," she replied without changing her expression. "Your total is $105. "Please don't be so cold with me." She lowered her eyes. "I'm used to it. I'm sorry." "There's no need to apologize." I took a step closer. "Can we try again? Can we fix what I broke?" She looked at me quietly before answering, "I already tried my best. I know. I'm the one who failed you." My voice trembled. "Please give me one last chance. I love you." Tears welled up in her eyes. I reached out, pulled her gently toward me, and kissed her forehead. "I can't live without you anymore. Being away from you for 3 months felt like 3 years. I don't care whose child people think Caleb is. It doesn't matter to me anymore. I'll accept everything. Just please forgive me and give me one last chance." At that moment, Denise walked in from the back of the bakery. She looked at her daughter and spoke softly. "Raven, give him another chance." Weren't you planning to disappear just so you wouldn't have to face the divorce hearing? Deep down, this is what you've wanted all along. If something went wrong, then let it be corrected instead of throwing everything away. I looked at Raven with pleading eyes. Please, one more chance. After a long silence, she finally nodded. Relief crashed over me all at once. I wrapped my arms around her tightly, holding her as though I would never let go again. Then I hurried to help her close the bakery so I could take my wife and son home. The entire drive home, I couldn't stop smiling. I refused to let go of Raven's hand for even a second. The moment we pulled into the driveway, I hurried inside and shouted, "Mom, come see who's here!" My parents rushed out of the house. Dad immediately scooped Caleb into his arms, while Mom threw her arms around Raven and burst into tears. "Thank God you came back," she cried. "I've missed you so much." Raven hugged her back. "I've missed you too." Mom looked from the two of us to the box of pastries I was carrying and seemed to understand everything without another explanation. She smiled through her tears. "Some things really are meant to be." Then she said, "Come inside. There's something I need to show both of you." Raven and I exchanged puzzled glances before following her into the living room. Mom handed us a folder filled with documents. I opened it and stared at the pages in disbelief. It was a DNA test report. The results clearly stated that Caleb was the biological son of Montrell Carter. Raven and I looked at Mom in shock. "Mom, what is this?" She folded her arms and answered, "What do you think it is? That little boy is my grandson. I always believed he looked just like you, so I had the test done." My hands began to tremble. "He's really my son?" Raven's eyes filled with tears. "So, I was carrying your child all along?" At that moment, every certainty I had clung to collapsed. Raven looked at me in disbelief. "So Caleb really is your son?" Before I could answer, Mom handed us another envelope. "Read this first." Inside was a letter from Jamal.Raven. "By the time you read this, I'll already be back in the United States. I came to apologize before leaving because everything has gone too far. The truth is, nothing happened between us that night. I did intend to take advantage of the situation at first, but while you were unconscious, you kept calling your husband's name. That was when I realized that even if I had your body, I would never have your heart. I left you alone at the hotel and caught my flight overseas. When I returned and tried to find you again, I learned about everything that had happened. I'm truly sorry." Another note was addressed to me. "Montrell, Raven has always loved only you. She never betrayed you. Everything that happened was the result of my mistakes and yours. As one man to another, I sincerely apologize. Please cherish her and never make her suffer again. Goodbye." By the time I reached the end of the letter, everyone in the room was in tears. These were no longer tears of pain, but tears of relief and happiness. For the first time, I truly studied my son's face. Every feature looked just like mine. No wonder my parents had always insisted he was my child and quietly arranged the DNA test themselves. I gently took Caleb into my arms and whispered, "I'm sorry, son. I've been a terrible father, haven't I? I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you and your mother." Then I turned toward Raven, held her hand tightly, and said the words I should have spoken long ago. "My love, I love you." Montrell deserves criticism, but he also deserves sympathy. As the provider of his family, he devoted far too much of his life to work. In doing so, he often became emotionally absent, and his quick temper made it even harder for him to control his reactions. Little by little, those flaws widened the distance between him and Raven. If only Montrell and Raven had chosen to sit down and talk honestly after each misunderstanding, their journey together could have been far less painful. Instead, pride on both sides pushed them further off course, allowing silence and assumptions to replace trust and communication. Even so, some people are simply meant to find their way back to each other. In the end, Montrell's awakening and sincere remorse, combined with Raven's willingness to forgive, erased the walls that had grown between them. Most importantly, the arrival of their little son became the bridge that helped mend the broken bond between two young people who had never truly stopped loving one another. Love can never survive through the efforts of only one person. It is built through mutual care, honest communication, and a shared commitment to helping each other grow into better versions of themselves.